G'day. Trooper Cody and Steve. And I've said before in a few of our videos how sometimes the best videos come from subscribers who ask a question. But equally, sometimes they come just from somebody that makes a comment on the video. And so, very recently, only a few days ago, a very nice chap made a comment on one of my videos about his ancestors, grandfather, great-grandfather, who was part of the machine gun squadron in the Middle East, Light Horse, World War I. I thought, wow, that is something I've never actually explained before. And so, what was the machine gun squadron? If you read Ian Idris's book about the Desert Column, you will see that as the war progressed, the Light Horse, the troops, were issued with Hotchkiss machine guns and Lewis machine guns. And the Lewis machine gun is famous to even people that don't know it by name because it's in so many World War I movies. It's because it can actually be carried, and its most distinctive feature is the round drum that goes on top. That's the Lewis. But that's not a machine gun squadron. That was machine guns that the guys, the Light Horse blokes, just took out riding with them. So if you were talking about the Vietnam War, for instance, you would see a platoon would go out. Most of the guys were armed with their rifles, their M14, fully automatic or semi-automatic rifle, but a few of them, perhaps one per platoon, had the big M60 machine gun, and you always see Arnold Schwarzenegger and big black American Marines with this big machine gun they carry, and they have the belts of ammo around them. What the machine gun squadron was something completely different. This was purpose designed machine gun, heavy machine gun. The Vickers 303 machine gun. So the Vickers was belt fed, it was on a big tripod, it's quite heavy. The Vickers machine gun was much bigger and heavier than the Lewis or the Hotchkiss that could easily be carried and manhandled. Talking about machine guns, and I swing around. Can you blame him for jumping? So the Vickers was the next stage up. It was 303 caliber, just like the Lewis was a 303, but much heavier gun. So when they set up the Light Horse Squadron, for machine gun squadron, there were 12 Vickers machine guns to every squadron. That consisted of 4 troops. Each troop was 8 sections, 4 men to a section. So, 12 machine guns to the squadron. Break that down. That gives you 3 Vickers machine guns to the troop. So that's got 32 men in it. So how did this work? Because it is a big, heavy gun. So the Vickers itself weighed 30 pounds to 13 or 14 kilograms. It had to be mounted to a very sturdy tripod to counter for the massive firepower of this gun. So the tripod weighed 50 pounds, 30 for the gun, 50 for the tripod, which is 23 kilograms. On top of that, the Vickers different to the Lewis. If you've seen the Lewis, you know, I said you could just pick it up and shoot it with a round drum on top. The Vickers was water cooled. It had a big jacket around the barrel to keep it cool, and that contained 7½ pints of water. And I've just realised I have not done the calculation to how many litres that is. 7½ pints of water was about 3 kilograms in weight. So I think that means 7½ pints is the equivalent of 3 litres. Another 3 kilos in water. But wait, there's more, like any good modern annoying advert says. And of course the ammunition came in boxes. It was belt fed, a cloth belt, not like Rambo with the metal pieces that all fly apart. It was a cloth belt. At least the cloth belt could be reloaded afterwards easily. There were 250 .303 bullets to a box, and they each weighed a further 10 kilos, 22 pounds, 10 kilos for 250 rounds. 250 rounds, how many bullets are you going to need? Would you believe that Vickers fired 500 rounds a minute? If you just fired it, it fired 500 rounds a minute. After, because it was water cooled, if you've seen it in the movies, you've seen a hose coming off it, going into a tin can. That isn't water coming out of the tin can to cool the gun. The jacket had the water in it, and as it heated, it boiled. When it boiled, it turned to steam. There was a valve that allowed the steam to go through that hose into the can, where it condensed back into a liquid. They would shoot the gun, the water would boil, steam into the tin, and after a while they would stop and quickly put the water that had cooled into the tin back into the jacket, seal it all up, and keep shooting again. Now after a certain number of rounds, the barrel had then become so hot, despite the cooling of the water, it had to be changed. The light horse blokes were so efficient at doing this. Of course, this all happens, the gun's fired in training, gets hot, righto guys, stopwatch, change barrels. The light horse blokes were trained to change barrels in 2 minutes. Hot barrel out, cold barrel back in, start firing again. The weapon could fire 10,000 rounds accurately without overheating before it needed a barrel change. 10,000 rounds is, quickly help me here, 400 boxes. I should have done the math before I turned the video on, but that's why when you hear there were 3 machine guns per troop of 32 men, that's because, yes, a horse carried the 15 kilo Vickers machine gun with 3 kilos of water in its jacket, and it carried the 23 kilo tripod, but by far, more than anything, it was the boxes and boxes and boxes of ammunition that had to be carried. The light horse troop of 8 sections of 4 men, 32. As I've said, there's 3 guns. So what that means is out of those 32, you have 3 gunners. You have 3 layers, L-A-Y-E-R-S, and they were the guy that serviced the gun. They were beside the gunner, opening ammo boxes, feeding the ammo, cloth belts. You wanted to feed them efficiently into the gun so that there was no tangles or getting caught. The other good thing about taking ammunition and putting them into the belts was you could inspect each cartridge to make sure there were none defective, because the last thing you wanted was an enemy charge, the cloth belts going in, the cartridge is defective, the gun jams, you've got to clear the jam. So those guys would meticulously check each bullet as they put it into the cloth belt ready to fire. The bullets had different coloured back ends on them. So if you look at a bullet, and you should have brought one, shouldn't I? And you look at the back end, there's a primer, and in there was painted different colours. If it had no colour, it was just an ordinary bullet, an ordinary 303. But there were armour-piercing bullets, and there were tracer, and the tracer's the most important one, because basically when you fire the bullet, tiny little bit of phosphorus that is perfectly safe. I don't remember if you in high school you had phosphorus in a jar of water and the teacher would show it to you and shake it up, juggle with it, perfectly safe. But then you took that tiny piece of phosphorus and you exposed it to the element of oxygen just in the atmosphere, and poof, it bursts into flames. That's all it needs to burst into flames. So there's a tiny bit on the back of the bullet. When you fire it, you can see it, even in daylight. You can see this phosphorus burning on the back of the bullet, and so you know where your bullets are going. So in Battle of Britain's, lots of vision of this where you can see, as the pilots are shooting, they can see where their bullets are going, because that was tracer, so that was a particular colour. And, of course, phosphorus is famous for how safe it is when it's not exposed to oxygen. It's so safe, you can put it in petrol, and as long as it's in petrol, it's fine. And you can pour jelly in, and as long as it's still in petrol and jelly, it's fine, and you can get a container of it and juggle with it, and it's perfectly safe. But when you drop it from an aircraft, and that metal container hits the ground and bursts open, and all the petrol and jelly flies everywhere, phosphorus bursts into flames, and that's napalm. Basically, that's what napalm is. That's why that petrol, it just explodes into huge sheets of flame. And yet it's perfectly safe while that phosphorus is not exposed to oxygen. All right, well, this is probably getting carried away with this one. It's getting a bit long, so let's just leave it at, it was well known that if silence wasn't required, the guys, the machine gunners, would have their 7.5 pints of water in the gun jacket, and they would fire 4 or 5 shots. They would then drain the water off and make a cup of tea, because they could boil the water as quick as that. And there are diary entries about guys, the old saying, gasping for a cup of tea, cobber. Well, it might have been great to have a cup of tea, but it had a little bit of machine oil taste from the machine gun. But that was a thing that they did particularly at Gallipoli, where it didn't hurt firing off a couple of shots just so you could make a cup of tea. And of course the other famous story is that, yes, sometimes they would run a bit low on water for the water jacket, and so you know what they used. Yep, they used their own urine into that water jacket, because who cares if it kept the gun functioning, so you didn't have to worry about the enemy. So I guess about the only thing left to make sure I cover in this video about machine gun squadrons is you've got to remember the troop with 3 machine guns is set up so that when the guys ride up and somebody's leading leading one of the horses with a machine gun on, and leading a horse with a tripod on, and leading a number of horses with their ammo boxes on, you say, hang on, you've got 32 blokes, and yet there's only 3 machine guns. Well, everybody still had their 3-0 on their back, and so when the guys were unloading, you still had 1 in 4 was responsible for the horses, because you set up the machine gun, and then you got the horses the hell out to safety until they were needed again. And so can you imagine how often these blokes trained, riding along, right, here we are, this is where we're going to do it, unload the horses, tripod down, gun down, ammo boxes, feed it, that horse is clear, these horses are clear, get those horses out of here, bring up more horses, unload more ammo boxes, get them out of here, boom, training, set up, ready to fire, sir, yes, good, great training exercise. Okay, now, dismantle, right, call in the horses, horses come back in, organise, so that the horse that's supposed to have the machine gun gets the machine gun, the horse that's supposed to have the tripod gets the tripod, then everybody, organise, boom, get the hell out. I'm talking really quick, because you weren't swanning around having a cigarette doing this. You were doing this fast, efficient, and dealing with horses at the same time, and gunfire, heat, sun. Cheers, till next time, thank you.